All right, Eric, what encouraged you as you preach this sermon?
I do think that at its heart, this concept of God's gracious condescension and His covenant provides the most amount of hope to me personally, because it's 100% predicated on Him ultimately. Not that we don't do anything, but like He's the one who sustains it all, begins it, takes initiative.
Yo.
I thought your main point was really encouraging. Just like the way you set up, like how like we all want to try to like make a name for ourselves, but like how does God make a name for Himself when He doesn't by like making a name for His people. It's like the opposite of what we do. It was like a cool contrast and something to think about. So
Appreciate that.
So interestingly, I don't really care for myself to make a name, but in the same way, like the reason why our names are being made is to make His name great. So it's like, why don't I care about that? And is that even really good? So you made me think about things like maybe the opposite or the inverse of what you had, but it's still challenging and kind of encouraging. Like, oh, why am I doing this?
Yeah, it was encouraging just to hear, I think, your whole main point of, God's name is the point. So God's name is the goal and the end of all that He does, and so just my life personally as well, and things that go on in my life, like it's all about His name.
Yeah, something I think for me, Eric, that part of David's prayer where he, wants to confirm what God's doing, and then sort of that connection with like the church, and we ought to praying that God's kingdom would come, that He would confirm His promises, and just sort of think of it's encouraging to me because it, I guess, just kind of shows I'm part of something bigger, the church, and God has a big plan for David and a big plan for the church, and so it's inspiring to like live up to the calling.
Appreciate it.
What was encouraging to me is just that God does stuff for His name and our good. So it's like a major thing. This isn't the only thing that God's ever done, but He does work for His good. But in working for the glory of His own name, He does stuff for us. Like, oh, okay, cool. What do you think you missed on?
Yeah, so there's a lot of concepts in here that I generally understand how they work together, but not comprehensively. And so, again, we were alluding to it earlier about the focus being like throne, which I'm obviously well aware of in this chapter, and we could talk about my main point, whatever. But the reality is that I didn't talk a lot about throne. I didn't talk a lot about kingdom. I didn't talk a lot about house. So tightening up how these things are working together, which I think they are in this, without oversimplifying it. Yeah. I need to really make progress on that in a text like this that has so much.
Yeah.
There are a little, like, so there's a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of concepts in this that like you need to explain well. There's like some things in here that are not like as important. I think you spent like a little too much time on. Like I think you went a little bit on this like tangent about prophets for a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's just like you don't need to talk about
right.
that with the text. That's got a lot going on in it already.
It's good.
Your intro is good. It's really good, but I think it's a little bit too long. And so just like little things like that, I think you can like.
You're double dipping because I made fun of you earlier?
It's the same. I mean,
they're all under the category of saving time.
Yeah, it's the same like critique, just like like these aren't like big concepts of like.
Right.
You know what's funny is like I felt that about the intro while I was writing it, and I didn't have that about the prophet in there, and I started doing it. I'm like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
So I received that.
If it's just like a small like thing and it's
Yeah.
not necessary to your argument, just like,
Right.
kinda,
Yeah, that's helpful.
There's a lot of dense explaining, and I mean that's just the passage. So at times it just kind of felt hard to listen to because the question of just like, why does this matter for me, kept coming up. So I mean,
Yeah.
you did bring it to us a few times, but I mean, it was hard because there's a lot.
Guys are good listeners, man. I kid you not, that was another thing that was like, got very little application. I know this, yeah, so I'm good listening.
Yeah, I enjoyed that you were talking about, this covenant with David, and even connecting it with the Abrahamic covenant. But my question would be, what's the significance here with this covenant and what God's going to do through this going ahead in the future? Especially you're making the connection with your gospel connection. Like this is son of Abraham, son of David. But just kind of fleshing out the significance of this covenant.
Yeah.
To look forward to that promise
Yeah.
that you made.
That's good.
Yeah, mine was application. Just need a little more of that in
Yeah.
there. Get me more into the sermon.
Yeah.
You made a big point at the top that the order of your main point really, really matters. Like that you like doubled and tripled down on that idea. And then throughout your sermon, you flipped them
Yeah.
over and over again. So it wouldn't have really.
So did I flip it, or did I just reverse the order in the way it was presented?
Yes, but when you told us it's very important that it's in this order,
Yeah.
it made it sound like the word order was important, and so you can't play around with it if you're going to
Yeah.
say that.
No,
I'm confused.
I received that. I think I did catch it,
Yeah.
but I think I did at least maintain
Oh, you
the
did
logic
that.
of it.
Right.
But I still get what you're saying, and I agree.
Yeah.
But I just didn't know if you caught if I actually legitimately reversed
No,
the
you never
logic of it.
reversed the content
Right.
of it, but you did reverse the way you said it a bunch of times. So and because I was paying really close attention because you told me to.
Right.
So
Yeah.
screwed me up.
So is one fix just to not double down at the beginning,
Yep.
or is it? Yeah. Okay.
I don't know why, if it's just my notes, but it looks like your first point, like, just when I was writing it, I didn't have a whole lot to write.
Yeah.
And then the second point, I had good enough. And then the third point, I ran out of space on my page to write about it, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the first point was essentially just like a setup.
Yeah.
And then the third point, I would say, like, my gospel connection, like, flowed from. So, yeah.
I could see that.
That's good.
Yeah.
I guess it's hard because what you showed is true. Like, David isn't perfect. David does do wrong. But I guess even in Samuel, then, this is one of those few times where we don't have something bad about him. And so I was just wondering if maybe this wasn't the best time to put him down to bring Jesus up, but I don't like.
Yeah. So do you think I could have, like, just omitted him as not bringing honor to his name and just gone straight to Solomon in future, or would that still undermine?
Yeah, see, I don't know. Like, I haven't thought about it, but it just felt like this was like one of the penultimate points of history. David is looked at as a really good person here. It's
Right.
like, and somehow there's got to be a way where you can show that he's so great, but Jesus is still better without putting him down.
Yeah.
What?
Or maybe the method.
That was mine. There was a lot of kind of bashing David there for extended time. Obviously, you have to like do it to show like, hey, he's not the ultimate king. But
So I asked Nate, I'm gonna ask you, would you go like straight to Solomon? Would you not do that little thing on the shame of the
probably
kings?
Solomon. I mean, he promises it not to David but to his son. and then just how Solomon wasn't that one. So there's
Yeah.
still going to that lineage that you're.
No, it's good.
alluding to.
It's good. I didn't think about that, but I understand.
Or maybe even just go to the things that we get, which are better than the things they get from this.
Yeah, and I could have cornered myself into this, but focusing on the name, I bringing the shame, trying to draw the disparity between, I felt like was important, but I understand what you guys are saying, and yeah.
It's hard.
Just one little phrase that I'd recommend, I don't know, either tweaking or whatever, but it's you went to Revelation and just talked about Jesus as the bright morning star, and then you said something like in there, if you don't understand this, you won't understand your New Testament. And I think for me, maybe my ears are just a little bit sensitive to that, because I've heard like a similar thing before, and I've seen sort of a congregation almost be like decimated because they just can never understand
Yeah, I get
God's
that.
word rightly if they don't understand a certain concept. And so anyway,
That's good, man.
That's just my context.
Yeah, it's really good. I didn't
And
think
if you
about
are going
that.
to use that, it should be about something broader and far more important. And then you should also flip it, especially if it's near the end, and go, here's the thing. If you do understand that, you got the whole ballgame.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I think I was just trying to like turn up the heat on how important this is, but I
Right.
did it at the expense of my listeners.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
So a lot of this was pretty clean, even though you could have focused on other things, blah, 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 complicated text. A lot of it was pretty clean, but when you got to your gospel connection, you're saying so many things about
Yep.
Jesus that it got pretty sticky. It was, you were in your notes a lot, it kind of stop and go,
Yep.
and so it just makes it seem like, wait, so are you confused about this Jesus stuff or what?
This is good. This is good.
What'd you make progress on your second to last sermon Chicago course?
I mean, I will just say, like, as someone who's obviously about to be done, like, and I've talked to several of you about this, I'm almost through, and it's still hard for me to prioritize these sermons, not because I don't enjoy them or whatever, but for whatever reason, I just, if other things come up, and I'm saying don't do that, because that's what I did here again. It's like, shoot, I wish I could give these guys like a sermon that, you know, that's more representative of like what I preach on a Sunday. Not that this is still obviously all helpful, but I digress. Just prepare. Prepare more than I do. Yeah, I think due to my lack of preparation a lot of times here, even though I do have a tendency to roll, I've made progress on that, like at Addison a lot, but I don't feel like I've seen it a lot here. But I felt like I made progress with my speed here in this sermon.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought you took like so when I look at this text, like I get a little bit scared to preach this text because it's such a huge topic.
You're not alone.
Yeah, I think you like did a pretty good job of like being like, and this is like the big thing. Like God makes a name for himself by making a name for his people. And then, like, I was like, oh, that kind of snaps, like, everything together, and, like, I can totally see that, and I can see how you're making your argument and stuff like that, so.
I appreciate you saying that. I wanted to land at, like, my final argument, or my final application, which I didn't have time for, but, like, especially if I were doing this at, like, a pastor's conference where everyone's, like, super theologically minded, I kind of wanted to make the point, be like, don't get lost in like covenant, like theology and all this stuff. Not that it doesn't matter, but like look at the heart of this thing. Don't miss the heart behind it. So
I think you did. Like you got the main point and the main argument like right.
Yeah.
And it was very clear and very understandable. And I like some of the wording you put behind it too was very compelling too. So
Yeah.
You had us go back to the text a few times, and I think the way you did it was pretty effective. Just like look at this, and like I'm like, okay, I want to see this, and you're like, look at all these I will, and you were like using rhetoric while just reading the text too. So I just thought that was a really effective way to point back to the text and for us to like see this is what the Bible is saying. Like we can have a new appreciation for just the Bible.
Yeah.
So I thought that was just a really good thing that we did there, quite a few times.
Appreciate it.
I enjoyed your points and just the unity it brought to the sermon. I felt it was definitely unified, and we kind of got your main point with that, and everything just flowed well in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, overall I'd say the same thing. You gave us some really good kind of handles to work with, and seeing the text, and I think it's a great sermon, and when you have more time you can add the little applications in there.
I want to come back.
I think
sure.
your base is really good here. Main point and just how it flows. So
thought it was a decent sermon, and I just want to say that, like, in the first point, I'm not with Trev. No, I'm just kidding. He did a really good job at the beginning by problematizing something that seems so basic, especially if anybody knows the Bible. It's like, yeah, David wanted to build God a house, which is like the most ridiculous thing on the face of the planet. And you did a good job of being like, this is an absurd thing that David wants to do. Because it's like the God of heaven and earth, and he's like, I'm going to build you a house. Like, what are you talking about? But it made sense of it. It wasn't just like, so that's a funny thing, moving on. Like, it made sense by the end of it. But before we got there, you're like, now this is weird. And you did a good job with that, because it's so easy to just kind of launch into this thing and be like, what is even happening?
Yeah.
Or it makes sense. You're like, oh yeah, David's got a little God, and so he wants to make a little house for his little God.
Right.
So that was good. Yeah.
I think I like the way like you went and you're like, and then like David, these promises here are an expansion on Abraham's promise, and then in your Gospel Connect you went and like, and then when you look at the genealogy, it goes through David and Abraham and like ties everything together. So it was. I get like some of it might have been like confusing, but like I like the way like you were trying to like make that connection.
Yeah.
To the Bible.
No, those are the right moves. They just need to be cleaner.
Right.
Sure.
Certainly.
Although I said it wasn't like, I kept asking the question, so what for me, I thought, especially in the first half, you were making all these little like analogies and connections, just with little things like, where do you get your best ideas, the whole thing about the apartments and things like that, and just really quick, some a little bit more expanded. I thought it was just really helpful for us to kind of get into the story, feel what's going on, and I thought that was really helpful for us to stay interested too.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you overall did a good job in helping us see your argument in the text and the logical flow of like making David's name great leads to making God's name great. And so that was your argument. And so you were helping us see that in the text, where how you're getting there.
Yep.
Yeah, you got a good way of grabbing the attention of your listeners, Eric, and just a couple examples there. One, you're like, you have a favorite word, and then I'm like, you said, I know what your favorite word is, and it was just like a really good way to do it. And then you said this after the main point. You said, let's look into the text to see if this is so. And again, I was just like drawn in. Okay, let's see what the text says about it. Instead of just hearing your word, you kind of pointed us to this book, so that was helpful.
Yeah, so I think this builds on what some of the other guys were saying. This text is hard because it's so big in the Bible. There's so many things going on,
Right.
But it felt like it was pretty clean all the way through. And then especially, so the part I appreciated the most about that was at the very beginning of your second point, where before you got into like the details, you're like, here's essentially just like the broad thing that's going on here. You got through it, then you just hit a couple details. So it was a very effective way of getting through this section that could have taken 30 minutes of just plotting verse by verse, and wouldn't have actually helped us understand the flow of what's going on. But you did that pretty well.
That makes me want to ask a question, which is, you can't do that too frequently, though. I don't know.
Why?
Because then you're essentially like, take my word for it.
You're always saying take my word for it. can't argue for everything.
Right. Right.
So there's other things you could have brought up. Throne, this kind of other thing.
Yeah.
So you got to find your way through, but you're
Right.
essentially just saying like, how can I, in the time that I have,
Right.
in the most effective way possible, confirm
Yeah.
from this text the thing I'm trying to say.
Right.
Like you said, there's like 10 plus promises. So
Right.
You did that well.
Yeah, you handle that.
There
I
we
need,
go.
to, I need to circle the I wills in my Bible so I wasn't like searching on the on the spot. I'm like, I know there's more. Can't read that fast.
Just don't make a promise of how many there are beforehand.
I think I said about 10 or something.
But
Appreciate it.